Birch trees are probably one of my favorite trees to paint. This is a fairly easy painting to do and quite basic palette as well. We're going to use neutral tint, maybe some ultramarine blue as well, if you want to put that in the sky. And then we have a selection of green colors as well. So these colors are mostly on the cooler side. So you could use phthalo green for this. And then you can darken the green by using the neutral tint. First I want to quickly sketch out where the horizon line is, and then also a couple of lines so we can know more or less where the trees will be. We also need to keep in mind that the sun is going to be more or less towards the left side. So this will cast a shadow going towards the right. The first color I want to add between these trees will be this blue ultramarine. I'm only going to add some of the blue sky between these trees. The rest of the sky will be pretty light in value. We can start working on the background trees now. For this I'm simply using a green color, adding some neutral tint to that. If your green is too bright, you can also add a little bit of blue to that. So that will make it look more like phthalo green. All of this needs to happen while the background is still wet. So we'll paint in these trees in between the birch trees that will be here in the front. You can see that these values are pretty dark. But you need to keep in mind that the watercolor will definitely go lighter in value as it dries. Let's continue now to start painting in those evergreens that's here on the right side. So for this I'm using a round brush. Simply using a darker mix of that green color. This looks like black, but it's actually green with neutral tint added to it. Okay, so let's start working on the birch trees. So for this I'm using a mixture between ultramarine blue. I'm going to also add some neutral tint to that. So this will create a bluish gray undertone. We'll create the first layer for the branches, for the tree trunks with this mix. When you look at a birch tree, you can see that certain parts of the tree is darker, and it's almost like the tree is broken up into different segments. So it's mostly a lighter value, and then it has these different sections of darker value on the inside of it. So this is what we're trying to do here. We're creating that first undertone of blue-gray, and then we're going to add these little sections that's darker in value. For that, I'm simply mixing more neutral tint into the blue. You can even use a little bit of burnt umber in there as well to give it a warmer tone. Very important that you don't overdo this step. You want to add those details, but you definitely don't want to add too much of that dark value. There needs to be a nice balance between the dark and the light to create that contrast. You can see I'm also making the tree slightly darker on the right side since the sun is on the left side. So this creates a shadow. You can now use the same blue mix with the neutral tint and then create the shadows. So these need to be quick strokes. You can see the paint is fairly wet, so it's bleeding into each other. At this point, I'm simply adding more details on these trunks. When you're painting the shadow, you need to keep in mind the shadow is always darker closest to the object. This is something we point out quite often when we do drawing in level 3. Let's also add a couple of branches. So these are slightly lighter in value. For these very thin branches, I'm using a rigger brush. So this allows you to create very thin lines.